Welcome back to this week's episode. I'm here at the Digital Wildcatters Evolve or Die studio with my man Collin McLelland, aka Frack Slap, aka Oil God, founder of Digital Wildcatters. Collin, it's been a minute since we've been on the mic. How you been,
I can't believe you just threw out the Oil God. That's old school.
Well, I mean,
you have to be an old school friend of mine to get that reference. So
I think it was self-proclaimed too.
Yeah, no, it very much was. I mean, no one gave me that title except for myself. I ordered coffee mugs with it and everything. So, but it's funny because you know why? Back then on Twitter, no one was talking about oil and gas. It was all just like I was involved with crypto Twitter, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And so I needed a handle, and I was just like the Oil God. And then once energy Twitter kind of started building up, I was like, okay, this is kind of like pretentious. I'm gonna, and then I got Frack Slap, which there's an engineer somewhere out there that he came up. It was a Society of Petroleum Engineer conference, and he was talking about these things called frack hits. Okay. And anyways, he said there was a spectrum of frack hits. He had some frack slaps, some frack kicks, and so I got that name Frack Slap from some engineer out there.
Dude, so that's funny because I was going to ask you how that like evolved, like, you know what I mean? Because it's a very unique, but it's catchy, right?
I need to find out who the engineer was that came up with that spectrum, because I definitely owe him a steak dinner. So
right, yeah, because I think that one's gonna stick, right? Like that one, Frack Slap is.
I mean, my kids call me Frack Slap, so
that's great.
I'm legally Frack Slap now.
That's hilarious. What? There's a dude on Twitter. It was funny because I think you might have actually got me on the Energy Fin Twit a long time ago, but there was this dude on there. I think he's called Little Pump or Little Frack. I don't know.
There's a Little Frack Slap. There's a Little Pump Jackski.
Little Pump Jackski, and it was funny because he would like throw darts at you every once in a while, and so I don't know. So
Little Pump Jackski was me.
Oh, it was.
I started that one. Little Frack Slap is he's a young, bright, up and coming engineer.
Maybe.
But Little Frack Slap, he's always taking shots.
Maybe that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, because it was like there's like little like because I knew it was harmless, but I was like, yeah, this dude's like pretty brave. He just throws shots.
I love that dude.
Right,
he's one of my favorite people in the industry. So like he's actually the future of oil and gas, and so
nice. Is he's pretty anonymous though?
Yeah, a little bit.
Cool. Well, if you're on Twitter, follow him.
It's funny because he was here in my office, and we're up here one late night drinking, and the CEO of a big oil and gas company was here too with us. And told the CEO, I was like, hey, Little Frack Slap on Twitter? He's like, yeah, I love that guy. I'm like, that's him right there. Boom. CEO ended up hiring him, and so now he's one of their reservoir engineers. Yeah,
dude, that is so cool, man. That's the like cool stuff around oil and gas that like nobody knows about.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like these little stories and these little like networking things that weave in and out of like people's careers.
I mean, it's very much a handshake industry, right? And very much a personal relationship. And I think we're starting to get out of the like good boy network. But it's still very much like handshake, relationship driven.
Right.
And so that's one thing I love about it, because it's got a ton of great characters, great people.
Yeah.
And the industry will reward you if you just go out there and meet people and network. So.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And we can definitely touch on that. But I want to make sure that, I mean, you guys have been on a freaking rocket ship, and I'm excited to give the listeners a taste of what's to come while talking about Fuse, which is a big one coming up. Which, according to your billboard, is an energy conference that doesn't suck, and you certainly don't have to wear a suit. And I want to provide value for the people listening, because most people listen to like the first 3 minutes and then they probably switch it off. But what is Fuse? And then we'll get into the life of Collin McLelland.
Yeah, so Fuse is the South by Southwest of energy tech. And so when you think about it, the energy industry's always had these conferences, and they're boring, they're stale, they're in convention centers. And so we came up with this idea back in 2018 that there needs to be a South by Southwest of energy tech. And we wanted to bring together all energy verticals. And it's funny because what's happened in the world now, it's needed more than ever. You need a platform that can bridge traditional energy and new energy. So bring together all the verticals from oil and gas, renewables, geothermal, hydrogen, batteries and electric vehicles, and really ultimately just have we always took the approach of we want it to be a big party with a lot of content injected into it. And so it's festival style, it's outdoors. We got, I think, 4 blocks blocked off down in East Downtown Houston. It's all at breweries. And so it's just a completely different look from the traditional oil and gas or broader energy industry. And that's what we want to do. We want to have these collisions happen. And these collisions we just talked about, all these people, you get a bunch of smart, forward-thinking people together in the room, these collisions happen. Those are the catalysts for ideas and collaboration and opportunity. And we've seen it time after time at our previous events, whether it's Empower or Energy Tech Night. So that's what we try to do with the events, is build community and meaningful relationships.
Yeah. You guys have done a phenomenal job at it. And you've disrupted not only just like the networking space, the content space, the energy tech space. I mean, it's crazy to see what you guys have done. And, again, just to kind of sit on the sidelines. And I've, since back in the day, we knew each other, and to kind of watch at arm's length what you guys have been doing. I try to be involved as much as I can. We're all busy, but
dude, you're one of our biggest supporters. I mean, think about it, dude. You were on some of the earliest episodes of our first podcast. You remember we had a little closet back there with the kitchen dining table and a floor lamp from Target. Awesome. Now look at our studio that we're recording in. Like, this is like it's 10 crazy. Times better. So
yeah, I know. I remember back in the day, you'd call me at like 2, you'd be like, dude, can you come here like an hour? We need someone to get on the podcast. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah, you know how it is as a content creator. You just got to be scrappy and make some things happen.
Dude, that's so true. Well, no. So for those out there, it's going to be, remind everyone about the dates again.
October 26th and 27th in Houston.
Yep,
so
that's it.
All day event, big party. Got free beer starting, I think, at 4:00, and then got entertainment. So it'll be a good time.
That's gonna be great. Great speaker lineup too. Obviously, like top notch.
I mean, the who's of the energy industry. So you have Toby Rice coming and talking about the future of LNG. You have Mike Skelly, who is the man in renewables. You have Jane Strichter, who is over the Houston Energy Transition Initiative over at Greater Houston Partnership, and we're really aligned with the city of Houston on what the city can become. And so, Jane's just an amazing person. And then, Tim Latimer, CEO of Fervo Energy, which is one of the leading geothermal companies. So if you want to come learn about anything and everything energy and get some cross-pollination, this is the place to be for sure.
Yeah, I got a taste of that at Empower, and that was more of like a sort of focused around Bitcoin mining and that, which again was like one of the first probably the first sort of Bitcoin energy merge.
The first one in the world. No one was doing it.
It's kind of hard to describe because it's so new, right? But ultimately it was like I met people that had been a lot of times like former oil and gas who then transitioned into Bitcoin mining or are doing, a combination of both. But it's saying that it was like the ROI from my time. And I was only able to kind of pop in and out for a couple hours each day. But like every handshake, every person I met, there was intent. It was like, hey, how can we work together? And like I can imagine Fuse is going to be like that. On just
we're about, open source, collaboration. It's interesting because our events manager, Sydney, she didn't work with us during Empower, but we were in the interviewing process. And I said, hey, why don't you stop by Empower and just come see what it's about? And she got there, and her feedback was, she's like, everything's great on logistics and everything, but she's like, what sticks out to me? Look at everyone talking to each other and having a good time. She's like, you know how hard that is to do at events? And you think about it, like these other industry events, you go there and it's in these convention centers and it's real stale and stuffy. I'm an very extroverted person, and it's even awkward for me to just like go up to someone and talk to them. At our events, it's just not that way because it's all about the setting, and it's all about the rails that we've built it on to have, essentially remove the friction in those interactions. And so that's what we care about, is how can we actually get people talking and have higher ROI on time. Empower was very unique because yes, we're bringing Bitcoin miners together with energy companies, and Bitcoin mining is energy infrastructure. They're looking for cheap and reliable energy. And man, we had Bitcoin miners, CEOs of some of the biggest Bitcoin mining pools coming down from Seattle, coming from international, had people from all over the world.
Yeah, dude, I met people from everywhere.
Yeah. And crazy. Just boom, intermingling at this brewery in Houston.
After a fucking tsunami of rain.
Yes.
Which is like,
first 2 hours of the event, we went through a hurricane, and that was actually added to the experience. People are like, we all went through that shit together.
Dude, that was crazy because it was raining, and there was just this dark cloud that just passed through downtown and it smashed you guys. And I was thinking, man, this is going to be nuts. And then, of course, I started seeing like people on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff taking pictures like, we out here. Like, we're not leaving.
You want to hear, I'm going to give you the first person perspective of like what it felt like to be in our shoes. Because, all right, we're getting a couple days out towards the event, and all of a sudden you start seeing some reports of rain showers or rainstorms. And anyways, it's like, 20, 30%. And we're like, okay, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Then you start getting up to the night before and it's like, okay, it's definitely raining tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I kid you not, I wake up at like 4 o'clock the next morning and I'm checking on the storm and it's moving into Houston.
Oh,
But they're saying it's going to stay north of I-10 and we were south of I-10. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
good.
we're going to miss it.
Yeah.
And also I was like, no one's going to come right at 9 o'clock when this thing opens up. Okay. I was wrong about that. Everyone showed up at 9 o'clock and we only had, I think, like 3 people doing registration.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the line just going down the block and this storm just rolls right over us. You have people down the block and the storm is just coming in. We have our first session going. Collin, who's one of the founders of Crusoe Energy, is giving a keynote and he's in this outdoor tent, the tent packed full of people in this tent. Is literally water coming in the tent because it's out in the middle of the street and it's like flooding. And so, yeah, we, and then it was like 2 hours of that. And then all of a sudden it's the most beautiful weather you could have asked for the next 2 days.
Yeah. Then it was just like sunshine.
And then
no
everyone
clouds.
had like that war story of going through it. And so everyone like felt bond. It's weird how you can build like people build community off of bonds of going through adversity.
Yes.
And that added to the event. And
Totally.
in hindsight, like next year's Empower, we're moving it to the beginning of March because I went and looked at statistical data of rainfall
Good point.
to make sure that we mitigate that.
Yes.
And so as you get in April, it's more, rainy season. And
Gotcha.
So anyways.
And March will be beautiful.
Yeah.
And maybe, and even if it's like slightly chilly, it'll be nice because you'll be outside anyways.
Yeah.
A little sweater or whatever. So
yeah, we yeah, that was a hell of a war story.
But like you said, it adds to the story,
Mhm.
and it adds to just like the overall it's kind of a parallel with entrepreneurship, right? Like you plan for it and then you just get punched in the mouth and you adapt.
You get punched in the mouth and what are you going to do? You just, you figure out what your plan is and you move forward and you can't be stressed. You just have to figure out what's the next steps. And so that's, I mean, it's a perfect parallel for entrepreneurship at a high level.
No kidding. Well, before we keep going here, I just want to remind all the listeners that I'm currently opening up sponsorship opportunities for Wicked Energy. If any energy-focused companies are looking to increase brand marketing, visibility, and awareness around your company's initiatives through the podcast, hit me up and we'll figure out a way to work together. So for you, like, let's kind of like back up a little bit in the stories. I mean, you started off in oil and gas, originally from Midland, Texas.
Yeah.
Hit the entrepreneurial life, hit the ground running there. But tell us, I mean, so what was it like growing up in Midland? I mean, were you always interested in oil and gas? But like, kind of back up to like the early days of Collin and then share the journey.
Yeah, I actually wasn't interested in oil and gas, and I actually knew very little about oil and gas. Actually, nothing about oil and gas growing up. And so, growing up in Midland, have you ever seen the movie October Sky?
A long time ago.
Yeah, so it's about this kid that grows up in a mining town. I think it's West Virginia, and he wants to be a rocket scientist. And he ends up, the whole movie's about him growing up and becoming a rocket scientist for NASA. But his dad was a coal miner. They're like 4th generation coal miners, and it's kind of how like Midland is. It's a mining town, and it has this gravitational pull where you just can't escape the oil and gas industry. But in high school, I graduated high school in 2008, and the years leading up to that, I was fascinated by the internet and e-commerce specifically. There was no such thing as Shopify. I was, buying books like the eBay Bible back in like 2002.
Okay.
And I'm just like, you can make money on the internet. You can sell things on the internet.
Right.
And so I was obsessed with selling things and wanted to start e-commerce stores, drop shipping. Like no one was talking about drop shipping back then. And that's what I was fascinated with. And to the point where I nearly failed out of high school because I had no interest in school. I just wanted to build businesses. And I graduated in 2008, which was, right in the middle of the Great Recession. And oil and gas was also in a downturn too. And so I really didn't have much opportunity. Didn't want to go to university. Knew that wasn't for me. I wasn't going to go take on student loans to do something that I wasn't passionate about. And, I started looking around and I was like, oil and gas, like, I don't know anything about it, but one thing I do know is there's a lot of rich motherfuckers driving around in nice cars, nice houses in Midland. It's like, there's got to be something here.
Yeah.
And I remember this conversation very distinctly. I'm in Gold's Gym and I'm on bench press, and, I'm sitting there working out, and I run into one of my old buddies, Alex, and he was from high school, and he told me, he's like, yeah, I just got hired on as a roughneck at this company called Savannah Drilling. He's like, I'm making $80,000 a year and benefits. We're 19 years old,
Yeah.
and I'm like, holy shit, like, I want on that. And long story short, I end up getting hired on at Savannah Drilling. And so start drilling oil and gas wells. And this was, there's, if you have any listeners that are outside of energy, there was a shale revolution.
Mhm.
And this is where the United States became a massive producer of oil and gas, because now we were able to drill horizontal wells and frack and access the source rock where hydrocarbons come from. And that really started taking off around 2010, 2011. So I started off, we were drilling vertical conventional wells, and then boom, all of a sudden unconventionals started taking off. And I wanted to learn the oil and gas business from the ground up. And so I spent a couple years drilling, spent a couple years running wirelines so I could learn the completion side of the business. And my goal when I was out on a drilling rig was I wanted to become the biggest oil man that's ever come out of Texas, which is a huge task considering some of the oil men that have come out of Texas. And now, like, it got in my veins. Like, I was obsessed with oil and gas when I got into it.
Huh.
And so, it's funny because I'm not an oil and gas man now. I bought some oil wells back in 2018, and I was like, you know what? I actually hate operating oil and gas wells. I was like, it's a tough business that my skill set doesn't add any value to. And, part of my story is that a lot of people don't know is in 2014, I had this job as a project manager, and great job. I got to go to the deep waters of Gulf of Mexico on deep water drill ships. I spent a month on the North Slope of Alaska, negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, just amazing experience getting to see all these oil and gas basins in the United States. But I had a lot of time too. And so with that time, I saw the rise of Instagram, and we started growing Instagram accounts, my wife and I, Julie. And one of our accounts was called Words of Success. And it was like the cringiest business motivational content, but it did really well on Instagram back then. And so grew that account to 300,000 followers. And then I was monetizing it, selling ads to people like Gary Vaynerchuk and different brands that wanted exposure. So that was my first taste of producing content and monetizing it through advertising.
Wow.
And then my one of my partner Jake, now back then he was at a energy tech startup, and his little brother was at an energy tech startup as well, and they needed help marketing. And they're like, hey, this guy Collin, he's built Instagram accounts, like, let's get his help marketing. And I'm like, all right, the first thing that we need to do is let's go see who the influencers are in the space. And this is back in 2016, 2017.
So influencer marketing hadn't really hit yet.
Dude, there was no one in oil and gas. I go and run an analysis. No one was putting out content.
Right. Oh, in oil and gas, yeah, definitely not.
No, yeah.
Even in general.
And just in general. Yeah, in general.
It was, yeah.
So I looked and I was like, no one's putting out content, one of the largest industries in the world. And I didn't know where to start, but I was like, hey, LinkedIn, there's people on here. I'm going to start posting LinkedIn content. And just started posting LinkedIn content. And to be honest, I was kind of frustrated with the industry at that time. Like, it wasn't hip, it wasn't cool, it wasn't sexy. I saw Silicon Valley and all these tech companies, and it looked like something that I wanted to work in.
Yeah.
And so I honestly kind of wanted to get out of the industry, but I was like, you know what? Let me see if we can change the culture. Can we change the culture? I just started making posts. And the one post that put me on the map was I make this little short 3-minute video, just me walking around Grand Central Station in Denver. And I make this post about how oil and gas companies they need to adopt technology. And I ended the video by saying that they need to evolve or die. And boom, that video takes off. That's why, we got this evolve or die, like this evolve or die sign in our studio. So Toby Rice got us this sign. He told me when he saw that video that it inspired him.
What?
Like, that means the fucking world to me to hear that from a guy from like Toby Rice. So
Crazy, man.
just started. We wanted to challenge the status quo in oil and gas, and just started parlaying that content into live events. We started doing these meetups, and energy tech nights back in the day, back around 2018 and 19. And, these are just small things. We go get a couple kegs of beer and some pizza, and it's me and Jake organizing it. So you can imagine how poorly organized it was. I remember our first one, everyone's got a red cup of beer and we forgot plates. So they got a red cup of beer in one hand and just a slice of pizza in the other. Like, this is awesome. Like, this isn't like anything we've been to in oil and gas. And so, we really, what we build at Digital Wildcatters is we build community, and we just did that very organically and building something that we wanted. And it turned out that a lot of other people wanted that as well. So
Yeah.
it's been a hell of a ride. And, for me, one thing is that, coming from a oil field background, you come from an oil field background. It's the industry needs to do a better job telling their story and controlling the narrative. And you do that through content. I think content is the highest form of leverage of our generation. And I have a feeling that you believe this as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Given that you like podcasting. I mean,
yeah,
just to be able to tell stories and access people that you wouldn't probably be able to access.
Yeah.
That's just so important. And I hope that, we've been able to kind of shine a light on that for the industry and kind of carve a path.
Yeah, no, you certainly have. And I mean, it's such an interesting story. And I think part of why you and I get along and we align a lot of what we do is, I mean, again, you came from the rigs, I came from the rigs right out of high school, same thing. It's all I know. And, one thing that, it's, like I'd made a post on LinkedIn. It was like, it's hard to be afraid when you come from cleaning toilets on a drilling rig. You know what I mean? Like it's like, this is all like magic to me. It's like, how am I here? Like I literally, and then the first time I ever asked for vacation, I was cleaning a toilet in Canada. At the end of the tool pusher shack is the bathroom for the rig hands.
Yep.
And there's a door, and his office is here. And then there's a door connected to this like tiny ass little bathroom stall. And I was so scared to go around to like the actual front door of his thing. So I was like, well, if he knows I'm in here cleaning, he knows I'm doing my job. So I'll knock on the door. and we were working 2 crews. So it wasn't like you had 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It was like you just work. And in Canada with breakup, you would work all winter and then you might get a couple months off during. So there was no like scheduled rotation. And so I was cleaning the bathroom and I'm like, man, this is my time to ask for vacation. And so I basically was like, I'm knocking on the door. I'm like, Daryl? And he was like, who in the hell is in the bathroom and why are you knocking? I thought, I just got a question for you. And like, I was such a worm that like, I just didn't like looking back. I'm like, I'm such an idiot.
Dude, you know what's so funny about this story to me? So I broke out on Canadian rigs. They're down in West Texas, Savannah Drilling.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about Canadian rigs, but they all have the same format. So our tool pushers shacks were the same exact way.
Okay.
Yep. Bathroom on the end. You had the door, and the door led to a supply closet that was like in the tool pusher shack. So like, I was in those scrubbing those same toilets, so I can put myself in your shoes,
right?
And just imagine how cringe it is, like looking back on it.
Yeah, like little scrub brush in hand and green hard hat. And I'm like, Daryl, is there any way I can go home one of these days? Like, I have no like end in sight here. Like, what's going on? And anyway, this is definitely not about me, but just kind of going back is like, I can appreciate that because you probably experienced some of the same things growing up on I say growing up essentially on, you're in your career.
No, I mean,
on a rig. It's hilarious.
I always I grew up on a rig. I grew up on rigs and grew up in the oil field. And I love what you said that it's hard to be afraid when you come from a place like that.
Right.
Because you're literally coming from the bottom. Like all you have is upside.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
And I actually wrote a Twitter thread about this one time that it is a little bit, if you come from an affluent family, you have things to lose,
right?
And you don't take those risks, and so it's actually a little bit of a disadvantage at times if you want to do anything great in life. But when you come from the bottom, you don't have shit to lose, so you're willing to swing for the fences, and it's a very interesting cultural dynamic.
It is, yeah. No, it is. But so, kind of fast forwarding now, things obviously have completely changed. Things are going well, but I'm curious, what core belief have you changed your mind on over the last few years related to energy? I mean, coming from oil and gas, where it was probably us against the world, to now, obviously, your mindset and what your vision and mission is around Digital Wildcatters, which I do want to talk about more in depth.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, is there any sort of core belief that you've kind of reevaluated and thought, you know what, like I thought this, but now I think, a little different?
Yeah, that's a really, man, that's a deep question. I like that a lot. But one, my thought process continuously evolves. Like if your mind can't be changed with data and facts and reasoning, it's you're probably not someone that I want to talk to or be friends with, because I mean this world's changing fast and you have to continuously evolve in your thought process and take in new data and inputs. And so, core belief though, I don't know if a core belief has changed, but I would say that I see the future of energy a bit different. When I first got into oil and gas, like I thought oil and gas could never be stopped. And then, I've really thought a lot over the years. And, even if you take climate change out of the equation, oil and gas is still a finite resource. Now, how much supply is there? Who knows? I mean, all these horizontal wells that we're drilling, we only recover 3 to 4% of the oil. There's still a lot of oil underground. But at some point in society, we run out of oil and gas.
Right.
And so from that perspective, it's like, hey, you need new technological innovation to provide energy. And it's also very geographically dependent. We don't have hydropower out in West Texas. It's a desert. But we have lots of oil and gas, lots of wind, lots of solar. Up in Canada, you have a ton of hydro because, it makes sense. You have the resources for it. And so really looking at the energy mix, and I don't like saying energy transition because there's really not much of a transition, but there is an energy addition. We're adding a ton of renewables. I mean, you look at Texas, I mean, we are adding wind power like crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. But the y-axis on energy demand keeps growing over time. And it has the potential to grow infinitely, especially as we start traveling you want to start talking about colonizing Mars,
Right.
and traveling to other planets. It takes a lot of energy. And so energy demand has the potential to increase infinitely. And so even if you look at, current IEA estimates of the energy mix in 2050, oil and gas still makes up 90, 100 million barrels a day, which is what we're at right now. Oil and gas is going to be around for a long time, but also understanding that we need to diversify our energy mix. We don't want to be reliant on any one foreign actor. We see what's happening in the world right now with Russia and Ukraine and Europe. And so I wouldn't say that a core belief has changed, but I would say that the focus of understanding that there needs to be a bridge between traditional energy and new energy, and everyone needs to work together. Like we're pro energy.
Right.
And so going even deeper on my understanding of other energy sources has been something that's really changed over the last 3 years or so. Wouldn't say like core belief change, but that'd probably be like the closest thing.
Yeah, no. And I think you're starting to see that across the spectrum, and especially as like a lot of folks on the renewable space understand that there's fascinating technology on the oil and gas space. Oil and gas understands, we need to leverage some of the stuff. And so what you're seeing, and I started seeing the writing on the wall pre-COVID, is that oil and gas companies were going to slowly evolve into being energy companies, which a lot of the Europeans were already doing that. In here in the US, a lot of them are more focused on like, carbon capture, LNG. But ultimately, like the sort of the energy mix ultimately is going to become way more diverse. And I think you're going to start to see a balance. And it's like, what's so bad about having, renewables while the sun's shining, the wind's blowing, and the water's flowing, but then having like a secure backup plan when it's dark and you may not have it. Like, like why is that bad? Like,
there's nothing, like they don't compete with each other. Like it's a good thing. We want more energy, and I really don't, give a damn what source it comes from, as long as it's affordable, it's reliable. And, I think like a lot of problems right now deal with power markets and demand response. And so once we can figure out those issues, then you can have even like we're going through growing pains right now.
For sure.
While we figure all this stuff out. And I think, when you're someone that builds companies, you understand what it takes to get, like, you never just get from point A to point B. I mean, there's always steps. It's baby steps. It's, a little bit of progress every day. And when you look at the overall energy market, I mean, that's what we're in right now. So, that's one thing that, I've been really fortunate to make a lot of friends that are founders in the climate tech space. And I mean, it's just cool as shit to see some of the technologies that are coming out. I had a friend here the other day. He's a geophysicist in oil and gas by background, went to work for Intel. And now he's developed a energy storage solution that sequesters CO2, injects the CO2 in this closed loop system, and the CO2 holds the electrons.
Wow.
Like, that's cool. That's an oil and gas guy.
Right.
Solving energy storage. You look at Moji, my friend Moji over at some Vita factory, taking CO2, injecting it, and then using DNA sequencing to create ethylene and other feedstocks. Those are oil and gas guys that are figuring out energy and climate solutions. And so, if you
amazing.
look at what our mission is at Digital Wildcatters.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. We want to change the way that the world thinks about energy. So we want to raise energy IQ among society.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, like, nothing excites me more than I'll talk to a friend up in New York City, and he goes through and watches all my TikToks and listens to all my podcasts. He's like, I had no idea that energy was this important. He's like, no one talks about this in New York City. And I will do that one by one by one. Like, I will talk to people one by one to get that message out there, because it's so rewarding to just get people thinking.
Right.
We talked about our Empower conference earlier. There's a young kid at my gym. He's 20, 21 years old. He's a real estate agent. Has nothing to do with energy, but he came and volunteered at Empower.
Nice.
And now he comes up to me at the gym and he's talking about energy policy in Russia and Ukraine. He's like, man, people aren't talking about this. He's like, energy is the most important thing in our life.
Nice.
And he got that from Empower. Like, it was just a catalyst to learn. So raising energy IQ is important. And then also, I believe that we're building one of the most impactful networks to ever exist. I mean, the Digital Wildcatters community are the people that are solving the world's energy and climate problems.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool to me that we've been able to build the platform and community and give that community the resources that they need to go attack those problems. Yeah. So that's what gets us fucking excited every day.
No, you can tell. And if I mean, people obviously aren't in the room, and hopefully we publish a video at some point, but like you can sense the energy coming from Collin even through the microphone. I mean, it's deep. I mean, he's got such conviction and such a deep passion for raising the energy IQ, because it's, at the end of the day, regardless if Digital Wildcatters existed or not, Collin and I would eventually, we would pass, and things might be a little different or not. But ultimately, it's like, and a lot of it too is it's a very interesting example that, from the kid from your gym, is like, it's the younger generation. It's like, we have to pass down, and we have to create an environment and a space, a community, a platform to ultimately pass to them, to where they can build on top of that.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing that we can do is people that are in the energy space is, you can't boil the ocean. I mean, like I always said, like, I'm going to try with my podcast, I'll give her hell trying.
Yeah.
Chances are I may or may not. But if I can at least influence and educate my kids,
yes,
then they can then pass that on.
Yes.
And through the podcast, I had a dude that's connected to my wife. She's in real estate, so it has nothing to do with oil and gas, but she's got a large network that all of a sudden starts listening into my stuff. I had a dude out of Oklahoma who, was raised by a family who leaned politically on one side that was very much against oil and gas. And so he just, through osmosis, was like, well, oil and gas is bad. Well, then I connected with him, and he was like, man, like, you're such a good dude. Like, you and your wife are awesome. I listened to your podcast. And then, long story short, he's talking to his kid who didn't know what he wanted to do. He's like, man, you should get into petroleum engineering. Like, this is a great career and something that you could add like a tremendous amount of value for like your community and the world. And it's like changing one person's mind at a time.
You're doing the things that don't scale. And that's what everyone always focuses on. It's like, well, I'm not an influencer. I don't have 1 million followers. I'm like, you don't have to. I'm like, you have an Instagram? How many followers do you have on Instagram? You got 300? Cool. What if you talked about it on your Instagram stories and you changed the mind, or you educated 5 people?
Right.
And then what did they go do? They go tell their son, like, hey, maybe you should look at petroleum engineering.
Right.
It's incremental change. And showing up every day and doing those things one by one by one. You don't have to boil the ocean.
Right.
And you won't boil the ocean.
Right.
Like, you don't build anything great by going, we just talked about this. You don't go from A to B. Like, you have to have incremental change.
Yeah.
And imagine if you had everyone in the energy industry doing that.
Right.
There's millions of people.
Yeah.
And so that's what it takes. And I hope that we, the industry is still catching up to what social media is and how it's used.
Yeah.
And, you're fortunate, man. You got AES is amazing for letting you have a voice and a platform.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of companies out there that won't let their people do that.
That's true, man.
Shame on those companies for doing that. And so that's something that we need to figure out.
And again, I think it's changing, and it all takes time, right? And big shout out to AES Drilling Fluids. They've been like very utmost supportive. They took a recommendation that I had to start an internal podcast, which it's interesting because now a lot of oilfield service companies, folks that I know a ton of people in the OFS space, they reach out and they're like, man, I've been trying to talk to our management or our marketing manager about starting a podcast, but they're hesitant, this and that. And then like some of the success stories that I have within the AES podcast to talk to other oilfield service companies, they're like, we should have been doing this a long time ago, but there's still this hesitancy of doing it.
Yeah.
I talked to this company out of Norway, and I was, again, talking about content and like the ROI and the underpriced attention, and, going to a conference to where you can meet a handful of people. Whereas if you do it online, you can, obviously you can scale your message.
Yeah.
Like 100x. And so I was just kind of walking through some examples and some things that I've experienced through doing what I've been doing. And he's the chief commercial officer, and he was like, this is unreal. He's like, and he was taking notes. He's like, I'm going to get with our marketing team and this and that. But yet there's still hesitancy from their executive level who, again, it's, you only know what you know as you were evolving in your thing. So if you're in your, 20 years ago, someone in their 30s and 40s, they romanticize about what has worked to get them to where they are without understanding how to like get from where they are to the next level. And so that's where I always preach is like, for those who romanticize and like just hinge or like kind of hook their teeth into like what got them to where they're at from the last 10 years, they're going to have a hell of a time trying to get to the next level and compete with those who embrace the change. And, again, through content creation, Shell, they released 2 months ago, they said they wanted to be the best content creator on TikTok. Shell. I mean, that was amazing to me. I put that out on, I think, Twitter and maybe LinkedIn.
You know how many people sent me that job application to be their TikTok
TikTok manager? Yeah,
so
right.
I had like 50 people sent me, they're like, you need to apply for this.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, and again, like if they have the sense to understand where the underpriced attention is. And another example, all the interns that came to AES this summer, I'm fascinated about like consumer behavior and like just the younger generation, because that's ultimately where the money's spent, where the influence is, and the up and coming leadership. So I'll talk to them. I said, where do you spend most of your time, unless you're at school in the books? I'm like, what are you doing? And each and every single one of them said TikTok and YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, so if schools and if companies want to adopt the best talent, why are you not putting yourself and spreading your message on these platforms?
It's evolve or die.
Right, exactly.
This industry never had to market themselves.
Right.
They never had to market themselves. You produce a commodity, the world's going to buy the commodity.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
Right.
And I was just talking to one of the biggest EMPs about this last night. I was hanging out with, and like, you have to market yourself now.
Yeah.
And tell your story. And, I was given a talk to New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. And so there's probably like, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 people in this room. And it's all like good, hardworking, old school oil and gas folks. And, I got up there and told them, had this talk. And they're like, well, how do we get out? Someone asked me a question like, how do we get out of the echo chamber? Like, yeah, we can talk about these things in this room.
Right.
But we're preaching to the choir here. And I'm like, you go where they hang out. So they're on TikTok. They're on YouTube.
Right. Yeah.
Those are the two platforms where they're at. I said, we need to be creating content on those. And I love that Shell's looking for a TikTok creator. But the thing is it can't come from the major oil companies. It comes from people. Just like the story that you told, converting someone to at least being open-minded to oil and gas and energy. It's because he's like, oh, you're good. Like, you're a nice guy.
Right.
You're a good person.
Right. Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we're not trying to kill the planet here, you know.
Yeah.
We're just
And
trying to do good and produce energy to fuel the world.
Yeah.
Like the work that we do is good. And so you know, I think it's up to people like you and all the millions of people that work in the industry to tell the story. And I think that we're making great progress.
Yeah. No, and I think so too. And so I'm curious from your perspective as a very seasoned content creator. A lot of people have, you know, they're hesitant to get on there, whether because their employer is like, oh, you have to be careful on what you say, what you do, how you do it. But then a lot of people just don't, they don't like putting themselves out there, you know, fear of judgment, maybe a little insecure. Maybe they feel like imposter syndrome. Well,
It's a real thing.
I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to make it seem like I know more than I do. And so how would you, like, whether you're a young grad or whether you're, you know, someone who's been in the industry for 20 years plus, like, what are some like very basic things that people like that can do to get on LinkedIn, to get on whether Instagram, like what's your kind of like starter kit to creating content?
Gary Vee has a quote that has stuck with me forever, and it's document, don't create.
Yeah.
And I'll dive into that and unpack that a little bit here in a second. But first, I want to preface that not everyone has to be me. Not everyone has to be Justin. And, you know, be full-time content creators and thinking about this all the time. Like, that's not what we're saying people have to do. And, you know, like, I particularly really put myself out there. I get a lot of hate from all different types of people across the internet. And, you know, to be honest, I run off of hate. So it works for me, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. And a lot of people do have fear of being judged or getting trolled and things like that. And so one thing that I like to tell people is, one, you don't have to be a content creator, but start telling your story. Hey, did you learn something from someone that day? Maybe a mentor, you know, maybe you're a geologist and you learned something and you want to pass, hey, LinkedIn posts. I learned something fascinating today from, you know, Elizabeth, senior geologist. She taught me about this. Boom. Give value. Teach people. And, you know, one thing that technical professionals really struggle with is it's imposter syndrome, but you also get stuck in this bubble where, look, I put out a TikTok video a while back. It's like, what is a drill bit? And it did 1.1 million views on TikTok. And, you know, I had some trolling in there like, oh, you said the jets are in the cone. They're not in the cone. Like, yeah, sorry. I did it on one take and I said it wrong. Like,
right. Yeah. I know.
I'm trying to populate or educate the general population here. No one like gives a shit.
Yeah. Let's.
But just understanding, like, every single person there's someone below you that it's not up to your level of understanding, and you can boil things down. This is the whole, you know, you're on the Energy 101 podcast, and, you know, the whole thesis of that podcast is like, hey, we're going to ask the quote unquote dumb questions. They're not dumb questions. They're just, you know, questions that people want to know about energy. Like, there's so much knowledge that we have to break down in very simple terms for the general public. And there's this weird stigma in engineering and technical professionals where it's like, oh, I don't want to put myself out there. It's actually kind of weird in oil and gas because there's actually some polarization there, because you have that camp, but then you also have the camp where people want to really flex it, how much they know, and like, and, you know, these SPE white papers and debates. They're like, oh, I know more than you do. And it's just that's a ego contest. So there's actually polarizations on that. But
no, 100%.
My thing is one, just get started and document something. Just document something, a conversation you had with something, or something that you're proud of. And like, people are like, I don't want to promote myself. Promote yourself. Have confidence in yourself. If you don't, no one else is.
Right.
100%. If you don't have confidence in yourself, how the fuck can you expect anyone else to have confidence in you?
Right.
So one, have some confidence, promote yourself. Don't be afraid of that. You know, I worked with this, this is a little side tangent story, but I got asked to come speak to this nonprofit. And the nonprofit was special forces that are transitioning into a civilian career. So I'm in the room with like 30, maybe 40 Navy SEALs, F-16 pilots, Green Berets. I mean, these people are fucking high quality people,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about how to use LinkedIn. And the military has a huge stigma about putting yourself out there. Actually, I'm gonna wrap this up into a cool story. So one of the guys, his name's John Allen. He's a former Navy SEAL. Was blown up over in Afghanistan. I mean, dude is the real deal. And he's one of the ones that started this nonprofit. And back then, when they came to ask me to come speak to the group, he was starting to post on LinkedIn and was finding success there, storytelling. And he just kept doing that. And now he's one of the biggest YouTubers and podcasters in the world. He just launched his podcast 2 months ago. It overtook Joe Rogan for a week. Now it's number 2, Mr. Ballin.
Wow.
Podcast. Like, he's so famous now. I was talking about him and my kid's like, you know Mr. Ballin? I'm like, John? I didn't even know he was big on social media. I didn't even know. He blew up. I didn't even know.
Really?
And you know what he did? He got on TikTok back in like 2000, right before COVID. And he posted, he did something. He thought it was like, he was embarrassed. He thought it was corny, but he told a scary story. And it was like that story about the hikers up in the mountains that had like eat each other for survival or whatever.
Yeah.
And he made a TikTok telling that story, and then puts his phone down. He goes to the movies with his family. He comes back, millions of views.
What?
That was it.
That's crazy.
That's all his. And now he does content on scary stories.
Really?
Yeah. And would he have ever got there if he didn't just start telling his story? You can go look him up. John Allen on LinkedIn. His first LinkedIn posts are about his time in service.
Mm-hmm.
You know, talking about how scared his mom was when she got the call that, you know, he was hurt.
Yeah.
Overseas. And that led into, he's one of the biggest influencers in the world now.
Yeah. What a wild man. That just goes to show is like something that you, and that's one thing about, like, you know, whether it's the TikTok algo or like the LinkedIn algo, whatever algorithm is connected to whatever platform, is like something that, like, some of my best performing posts are ones that, like, I put no thought into and were just like that I thought were dumb, silly, and I was like, I just need. And then it was just like the creative juices, just like spur of the moment shit, like all of a sudden came out, and then all of a sudden, boom. And what you think it may be a dumb post may be so valuable for some people that all of a sudden that's what gets you going.
You never know. Yeah. It's actually, there needs to be a term that's coined for that, because it's always what gets traction is always the stuff that you wouldn't think gets traction.
Dude, it's crazy. And then some of the posts I like.
Sometimes I put all this work into it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a banger. And then like,
it's like
3 likes.
Yeah. Bro, I had the same thing happen to me the other day. I'm like, how was that a flop? I'm like, that was dope.
You're like, that was good shit. How was it a flop?
I know, man, it's crazy. But
yeah, so my advice is like, 1, get started. Start small. Start on a medium that you're comfortable with. A lot of people aren't comfortable in front of video.
Right.
They always tell me like, oh, you're so like you're natural in front of video. I'm like, you should have seen my videos back in 2017. They were cringe. Like I can't go watch them. Right. It's just repetition and practice and getting comfortable. But start with a medium. A lot of people are good at writing. So start off with some LinkedIn posts, or start a blog, start an email newsletter. If you like talking, start a podcast.
Right.
It's easier than ever now to start a podcast.
Oh,
it's not easy to create content, but you can create a podcast pretty easy. Like actually technically get it up and running. So that's my advice, is just get started and document. Don't create.
That's great advice. And man, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much. For anyone listening out there, can you tell them, so you're on LinkedIn, just mention the platforms that you're active on, and then I'll put all the links in the show notes. Yeah. And then just some upcoming events kind of going into 2023.
Yeah, if you want to find me on social media, my handle across all platforms is FracSlap. It's FRACSLAP. Twitter, TikTok's where I spend most of my time now. So find me over there. Find Digital Wildcatters, digitalwildcatters.com. Our Digital Wildcatters YouTube has a ton of great content too. So if you want to go to Fuse Conference, we hope to see you there. I think we'll get Justin a discount code for all the listeners. So you can bother him, send him a message, and we'll get you hooked up with a discount.
Sweet. Awesome, Collin. Thank you so much for all the listeners out there. Really appreciate it. Share this episode for anyone interested, especially if you're in Houston. Hit me up if you're interested in going to Fuse. Again, it's an amazing conference. We need to see you there. And if not, there'll be a ton of content that you can at least kind of check in and see what happened around the conference. Thanks for listening. And as a reminder, please reach out to me if you'd like to sponsor the show. Until next time, always remember that everyone deserves access, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody. Peace.